everyone. Welcome to Branding and the Beast, episode 4, a podcast about branding through words and images and making your business sound and look amazing. I am Shaun Bernstein of the Right Stuff Agency, and my wonderful co-host.
Alicia Disantis of 38th and Kip.
Hey, Alicia, how are you?
Oh, very good. Good to see you as always.
It's always a true pleasure. I met someone from Cleveland this morning, and we were chatting over lunch club, and I was thinking, oh, one of my favorite people is from Cleveland. So I
Oh,
thought of you.
Cleveland's the best. Shout out to Rust Belt cities everywhere.
Shout out to the Rust Belt cities. I am a huge Cleveland fan, as you well know, and I loved my last visit. As I said to her this morning, I said, I don't know that I'm going to rush back myself, but I have highly advocated for other people to go because it's just a fun town.
Well, I'll tell you, since we last had our episode 3, we're now on 4 here. I went to Toronto and I got to visit Shaun, and I have not stopped thinking about that city daily, perhaps hourly, since coming back from it a month ago.
Oh, that's really
Oh,
sweet. It was so much
it
fun
is.
having you here. We had a great day exploring the city. You explored for a whole other day that I wasn't part of.
It's a great city. I kind of want to live there, but I don't know if Canada would have me.
I mean,
No
you
more, no
can.
more Americans.
I don't know what the bigamy laws are like these days. You're already married. That might be a problem. But, there's green card
Oh,
bearers on your side. Why not our side?
yeah, it's a great city. Really wonderful.
Yeah, it was so good to have you up here. So today we're going to talk about going solo. And this is a really pertinent topic for us because Alicia and I are both entrepreneurs in our own right. Alicia, you still have your 9 to 5 as well as your own business. I left mine behind, uh, about 2.5, almost 3 years ago now, which is surreal. And really kind of made this business my sole focus over about the past year and a half. And it's been an adventure. And that's really the bravest day, as I said, for any entrepreneur is day one. The day you decide to open your business is terrifying. And if you're not terrified, you're probably doing something wrong, because there's a million different hats to wear, and there's a million things that you have to kind of pay attention to. And it does get easier, and it does get better, but there's so much focus that's involved.
Yeah, I agree. It's more challenging, but also more rewarding, I think, than anyone could ever imagine. Um, and I'm really excited about this episode, and excited to take the time to think about my own story. And because rarely do I have time to sit back and kind of reflect on where I've been and how far I've come. And that's important that we do that. We take time to do that. So I'm eager to hear your story. I mean, I know bits and pieces of it, but I'm eager to hear, because yours is, I think, a very interesting one, in how you left, what would be considered an exceedingly lucrative, successful career in law.
Which is always hilarious because it's really not. To be honest, I'm doing better now than I was then, which I'm grateful for. Kissing the ground, grateful. Um, I had really hesitated for a lot of years starting my own business because I have no formal business background. I have no formal business training. I had come from a family of entrepreneurs, so I knew kind of what was involved. I never thought that I had what it takes. I was nervous. I don't, have that, head for numbers, as they say. And so I was really hesitant. But I hit a point, and I'm going to tell the very quick version of the story. I have told this longer version on other podcasts, so there is a much longer version of my story out there. But the long and the short of it was I hit a point where my career in law was no longer sustainable. I really did have what I would classify as a mental breakdown. I left my career on sick leave and never looked back. I was very ill. I was not at a point where I could return. I do not handle that sort of stress well, quite frankly. And I don't blame my firm one iota. What I realized very quickly was if I had gone to another shop, it would have happened the same way all over again. And if I had gone to go start my own legal practice and my own, firm, probably would have happened the same way all over again. I have friends with mental health issues who are practicing law and love it, and they're able to make it all work, and that's great for them. My hat goes off to them. That wasn't me. I couldn't pull it all together. So I kind of took, what I thought I had in my arsenal of I'm a good storyteller and I'm a pretty good writer and I have done this before, and really just threw my hat in the ring. And maybe that was an act of bravery. I don't know, but I started with a bare bones website and one or two social posts, and people started coming to me. And I had, I'm very transparent. I had a side hustle for about the first year and a half that really did help, put food on the table at the same time. But I'm very fortunate in that referrals kept coming in and the business grew. You learn things along the way, and what you don't know how to do, you learn to ask for help. You learn to outsource. And people are kind, and you learn to put aside part of your expenses into hiring professionals to help you out with things. And looking back, it's the best decision I've ever made. I would advocate it for anybody. But that's the quick and dirty version of my story. Alicia, what about yours?
So mine was born out of necessity. So I graduated with a master's in marketing in 2010 uh, from Columbia College Chicago, which is a very esteemed arts and marketing school. And I must have applied, I don't even know. I don't even know how much. I mean, I couldn't even get a job designing used car flyers. It was that bad with a master's. There were no jobs. That we were in the grips of the recession. With $40,000 in student loan debt, and I was just so frustrated. I remember I had a studio apartment. I remember sitting on my bed, uh, crying, just sobbing in frustration because I couldn't even get a call back. Um,
It's horrible.
and so I said, I'm just going to start this business. And it, more of a way, just out of pure sanity, I think, for my own mental health. And, a lot of people say within the design community, how do you get clients if you don't have a portfolio? That's kind of the catch 22. Well, you do stuff for free. And people don't like to hear that. But I mean, for the first few years, most of it was pro bono. And it was just taking on whatever I could to get my portfolio going. And, um, the recession eased up. I moved to Denver and just kept chipping away. I mean, literally any opportunity I had, I would take it. And that organically led me into a lot of other areas. First, I was a practicing designer, but now I've moved into more brand strategy, writing, content creation, because I took all those opportunities and I didn't just poo poo them like, no, 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 no. I'm only doing logo design, only doing, this very specific niche. And looking back at myself and reflecting, I'm proud of who I was in my 20s, that I was able to kind of put my ego aside and do that. And it really opened up so many more opportunities. I feel like you just really have to be like flexible, just be open to things. And and that's where I am today. The journey was not pretty. I mean, it's rarely is, I think, for people, but it was a rough go, man. It's tough out there. Those were the days of unpaid internships for designers. I mean, it's absolutely vicious out there.
Well, you hit a great point. Is that I think so much of entrepreneurship, especially getting started, is checking your ego at the door. There is no room for ego, and there is no room for oh, this is outside my pay grade, or you have to be a little choosy about some of the work you do sometimes, and there will be people who will walk on you in your early days. I think it happens to all of us, and it does get better. But you have to really check your own ego out the door. You are building this business. You are the captain of your ship. You're responsible for the whole thing, at least to start with. And then as it gets bigger, you maybe hire others, or you start outsourcing some of the work. You find ways to make you expand and you grow and you find new things. I think that's actually a great segue because we're going to bring on our guest in a minute, who is one of the humblest people I know. And aside from the fact that he does phenomenal work that Alicia and I are both in love with, he doesn't have a single ounce of ego if he tried. Just a kind, warm gentleman. He happens to be a good personal friend, as you might be able to tell by this point. His name is Jose Garcia. His business is Zoca Studio. I'll let him tell a little bit about himself. He started the business about 5 years ago after leaving agency life behind to go solo in the graphic design world, and he is remarkable. So, if you're good, Alicia, let's get him on the line.
Let's do it.
Fantastic. Hey everyone, so we are excited to welcome, as we were just saying, my friend and now our friend, and now friend of the show, Jose Garcia. Hey Jose.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hello.
Fantastic. How's your day going, my friend?
It's great. It's a beautiful day here in Toronto, nice and sunny. Um, got up early, did some work, did a workout. Can't complain. Working from home, it's got its privileges.
Jose, as I tell you, his workouts are beastly and are the most intimidating thing about him. So
Well, you know what? I'm intimidated every time I go to a gym just because it's out of my comfort zone. But it's good to keep active. It's an important thing to do that.
It is.
definitely, I just got back on the bike post COVID, so I'm getting there. We're all in motion. So Jose, if you want to sort of tell, I gave a quick version of your story, but if you want to talk a little bit about, yourself and how Zoka came to be, and then we can kind of dive into it if you'd like.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think your first question was, how I decided to go out on my own. And, the biggest thing for me was in 2015 and to 2016, I was working at an ad agency downtown. And, you know, years past that, I was always in a sort of traditional formal design studio. Um, and having worked so long in that sort of industry, I was also doing side projects. I was working a lot with, the music industry and designing concert posters, and in that time when I was at the ad agency, I was pulling in really long hours. And I was just really noticing that my fulfillment in my day job wasn't the same as I was getting while I was, working on these concert posters and designing them. So it really came down to realizing that, my energy and effort that I was putting into my day job just wasn't aligning with what I wanted to do. And I didn't really think that when I first, started at the ad agency. I thought, I'm here to stay. I'm here to, make a name for myself. I'm here to sort of climb up the ladder and see where that takes me. Maybe I'll work for, an ad agency in San Francisco or New York, or you never know. But, when I first started out, um, I never really thought that I was going to go out on my own until I realized that, what brought me the most passion and fulfillment was, the side projects that I was doing at that time. And, a year later, that's towards the end of 2015 or 2016, I just was realizing that I wasn't happy doing what I was doing, and I would probably be more happy if I could dedicate and spend more time, working on these concert posters and packaging projects that I was starting to get at that time. So that's what really made me realize that I should go out on my own was, focusing on my happiness in my profession.
How terrified were you to make that jump?
You know what is I was incredibly terrified. I'm a very calculated person when it comes to my profession. I think that kissing goodbye a biweekly income and not knowing when your next paycheck is going to come is incredibly scary. Um, so I was very much that person, and I think I had to have a lot of conversations with family members to um, allow me to sort of see the bigger picture. But I think for me, the biggest motivator, the biggest person who encouraged me along the way happened to be my wife, Emily, which you guys are great friends. And I think she was the one who really planted the seed and allowed me to sort of see a bigger picture, which was, you're doing work for the music industry, you're doing the few packaging projects that you have, and we can tell that that brings you the most happiness. But what you're doing in your day to day job is it. So she said to me one thing that I think clicked in the most and allowed me to really kind of take the leap of faith and jump in, which was, how much of your time do you actually dedicate to your freelance projects, which is probably a short percentage of your time. What if you were able to dedicate 100% of your time? Where would that take you? And I don't think I ever really thought about it that way until just then, that if I really put in all of my efforts into harnessing like the current clients that I had, which were few, and really sort of jumping in and making myself available to those who needed me, where would that take me? So she was the one who really sort of planted that seed. And if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have gone that on my own. I mean, I think really her conviction and courage and belief in what I could do was what allowed me to do that. Mind you, like a side note, at that time, my wife was undergoing chemotherapy. She was diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. So, there were a lot of elements that we were juggling, in my personal life and also at the ad agency, which, I had only really been there a year. So, um, my mind and heart wasn't where I was. And I know that I wanted to, in some way, be at home and allowed to find happiness because, I was exposed to what it meant to, fight for your life through seeing my wife go through this. So I think there was a change in the dynamic of how I was able to see things and realize, time is precious, time is short. If I want to make something out of this, I got to make a decision and I got to be okay to move forward. And that's really how it happened.
To throw in a note, and Alicia will give you the floor in a second about bravery. You mentioned Emily, who obviously I adore, and we were classmates. And aside from her illness, she was articling at the time without, so in her sort of year of apprenticeship for law, without a guarantee of being hired onto a firm in a future. So it wasn't as though you had a partner who, had this multi-million-dollar income that you could depend on. You really, put your behind on the line to do this. So our hats go off to you.
Thank you. I mean, you're completely right about that. Like, now that I think of it, it seems like it was a very risky thing to do. And, you know, fast forward 5 years later, which is where I'm at now, I've been working under my name Zoca for 5 years. I'm so glad that I did take that leap of faith because it's been, a great decision. But yeah, to think back at that time, we're probably both out of our minds. And I think she was probably even more out of her mind to say, uh, go for it. But Emily was always a person to convey that you need to pursue happiness. And I think maybe what she was going through, she was also seeing it through me, you know, getting home super late from the ad agency and realizing that I was not happy. So she said, give it a shot. And, at the end of the day, she also put a safety net. She said, if it doesn't work out in a few months' time, you can always go back and, work at an ad agency or a design studio. And in a way, like that kind of provided a safety net without there really being one. So it was okay to think that I could fail, which was, you know, I think it's important to understand that there is that possibility of failing, and having that fear is a good thing.
Man, I love that idea, and it's interesting because that fear of, not so much the fear of it, but the acknowledgement of failure has come up multiple times in other episodes we've done. And my biggest question to you, and I have a lot of questions around how you tell your story and things like that. But firstly, I am a huge fan of your work. As a fellow designer,
Oh, thank
I
you.
don't say that. I do not say that really to hardly anyone. And your work is absolutely tremendous. And
I really
uh,
appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, no, you're welcome. Uh, my first question to you is how does one end up designing a poster for Dave Matthews Band? Could someone please just could we put that on the table right now about who we're talking to, and then we can move on to more of the meat of the podcast?
Yeah, I mean, I
Can
still
I
ask
can I
myself
jump
that.
in, Jose, to add not only Dave Matthews but Jerry Seinfeld, Snoop Dogg, Shania Twain, Chris
Oh, okay. I didn't know
Stapleton,
those ones. I didn't
uh,
know those ones.
basically everything Wilco's done. There's a laundry list, so I don't want to let you get out here without all the credits due. But then I'll shut up.
I appreciate that. I mean, there's kind of like a short and a long answer, but since we have time, I'll do sort of the long answer. So when I was still studying at OCAD University, um, you know, my biggest thing for me was, listening to music, and I got a lot of joy out of being able to listen to music and apply that to my work. And at that time, I didn't really know what a concert poster was, but I knew that a lot of the work that I was attracted to married the combination of music and design, and I really loved that idea. And at that time, or still at this day, my favorite band is Wilco, and they would come to Toronto every so often, and I would always want to go see them. And they're a tremendous band, by the way. If you never had a chance to see them perform, go do that. But there was this sort of movement that was happening where bands were really trying to collaborate with designers, and they were having concert posters designed as a keepsake, so that people who would attend the show, they could purchase this item that was limited edition and a collector's item, and they could remember the event. And I thought, how cool is this product that whoever got to design it, one, they themselves are associating themselves to the band, to the name. That's one. That's cool. And two, you're designing a visual that people are gonna sort of either have memories of, or like it's gonna be something meaningful to them. So, anyways, when I started to become more exposed to the idea of concert posters, and I was still at OCAD University, my first thought was, well, there's got to be a way that I can reach out and connect with them. And I think this is one of your questions for later down the road. But I literally just looked up their contact information on their website and sent an email and said, um, you know, I'm a big fan. I'm a huge fan. I would love to know how you can go about designing concert posters for you guys. And to this day, they were they were they were the only band that replied in that moment, because I did send out emails to other bands, and it was always kind of like, you could get ghosted, or there wasn't a reply. But they kindly replied and allowed me to submit something. And my first professional design project was for Wilco. And so really that became the first project. And then I was like, the moment I had a taste for it, I had to have more, right? So I had conviction to continue to send out emails and say, can I do a poster for this show and this show and this show? So it turned out that years later, a lot of my music poster work was predominantly for Wilco. But the thing with designing work for Wilco, that opened up every door for me from my creative profession. From landing the job at the ad agency, to my first design studio gig, to designing eventually for Dave Matthews. Like, everyone referenced the work that I was doing for Wilco and said, I'd love for you to do a poster for us that looks like this. So really, it was just kind of like you know, uh, sort of a snowball effect from that earlier poster work that I was able to do through them. And I'm so thankful for my relationship with them. And it's been uh, 17 years that I've been working for the band now. But everything that I've done through them has allowed me to work with others. So that's really how I was able to work with Dave Matthews, was a kind of like a reflection and a result from working from Wilco, really.
It's awesome. Awesome to be able to mesh, a love of music with what you do for a living. It's incredible.
Jose likes coming over
Thank
because
you.
the Dave Matthews print is in my powder room. So, gets to see it anytime he comes to visit. I think I've got four pieces up around the house, so I'm definitely a fan. Uh, in terms of sort of starting your business, and we talked about, you had a great quote. I actually wrote it down. It was okay to think that I could fail. How did you figure out the parts of your business that you didn't know how to do innately?
Well, I mean, this is kind of like, I think this combines one of your other questions, but one of the things that I'm not is a business person. Until this day, I'm not a business person. I'm a designer, first and foremost. So, with having your own company comes a business mindset and a business mentality that I'm constantly trying to sort of wrap my head around. And I think for me, like, that's one thing to this day that I don't really know, and I'm trying to learn sort of little by little. But the one thing that has sort of helped me along the way is just staying true to my strengths. So, for example, one thing that's helped me with my marketing is posting my work on Instagram. Instagram has been a tremendous tool for me in terms of being able to get my name out there. It's something that's obviously free, so I don't have to spend a lot of money in publishing my work, and it's a fast and effective way of showcasing your work. So, for me, using something like Instagram or other social media platforms has been a way to market myself, which again, it wasn't something that I knew how to do. Way back when I first started, I wasn't posting a lot on Instagram, but I was realizing that my peers were doing that, and it seemed so easy. Why wouldn't I do the same? I think we do a lot of what we do based on what our peers are doing, and I try to focus a lot on people I'd like to emulate and what they're doing. One thing I'd love to do eventually is post videos of my process, but that still requires like knowing a little bit about video editing, or like just taking the time to do that, which I haven't gone to yet. But there's a design studio out in Oregon that they're called Lincoln Design, and they do these fun YouTube videos where they just sit down. They have like this almost like a David Letterman late night type of like sort of talk show environment, but they're talking about design and their projects. And I'm just like, how cool is that platform? How cool the fact that they were able to do that? I'd like to do something like that at some point, or even just record my process. But yeah, just,
Very cool.
Shaun, back to your point, I think it's just, there's still a lot of things that I don't know. And, I'm constantly learning, but I do try to keep an open mind when it comes to my business, because, I'm here for the long run. I want to make sure that Zoca is something that I do, until I retire, or if not, probably still do concert posters even after I quote unquote retire. So, I will constantly be learning the things that I don't know.
When you're too old to know who the artists are.
What's that?
When you're too old to know who the artists are.
Yeah, well, I was just thinking the other day, I'm like, will there be a point where like artists think, by the time maybe I get 40, they'll be like, should we still have like a 40-year-old designing our concert posters, or should we get like some young blood designing our concert posters? But hopefully that's not the case.
I don't know what a Doja Cat is, but I can do that.
So there, so this what you were talking about just there, and a lot of the social media component of it leads me into my next question. And so
Sure.
as you were talking, I was trying to pull up. For some reason, I can never remember his name. Do you know uh, Aaron Draplin, designer?
Yes,
He's based
Draplin.
out of
Yeah, yeah,
Texas.
yeah,
Draplin,
yeah.
huge fan of his. And I originally discovered him through the Adobe Max conference, and he
Okay,
did
yeah.
a real time. His segment was designing a logo, and it was live. It just had the camera was on. It was a split screen with his face, and then he's walking through designing it. Man, I think it was for Fender or something. And I just thought there's no way I could do that in real time. Like, so the one thing I really like about him, and this goes back to my question for you, is that he has uh, very strong opinions on politics and ethics, and the way he is his agency's brand, essentially. His person, he has a very big personality. So I'm curious to know if your agency has its own brand, or if really you are, you as a person are your brand, as you talk
That's a
about, the story of what you do and where you stand on ethics.
that's a great question. So no one's ever asked me that, but I think innately it works in tandem. I am Zoka, and Zoka is me. I mean, I really am. Um, I represent my company in a personal way, but at the same time, when I started Zoka, I wanted to do something that would dissociate my personal name. I think that's that was important for me. But everything I put into my work is so personal. So when someone meets me for the first time, or I have like a new client or a new job, I obviously introduce who I am. Um, but really, what they're getting is Jose Garcia as a designer, and combination of both is it's kind of like a sort of a mysterious thing that happens, because when I post things on social media, I never say it's Jose Garcia. I always say it's I kind of use like the we, even though it's just one person, sort
Hmm.
of in my posts.
Yep.
We've done this project just to sort of I think it's important for me to think that I'm bigger than just one person. And it could be one day that maybe I have another staff member. But, I think what Draplin does, which, obviously Draplin is his last name and he really, that's who you're getting. And to some degree, Zoca is also Jose Garcia. So you are also getting me. But it was important for me to make sure that to some degree I could dissociate my sort of personal life through my professional life. But sometimes it just gets mixed up because everything that I work on is so personal to me that I'm sure Shaun probably can attest to this. We've done a project or two together, but you're really getting 100% of myself, and as opposed to you know maybe like a bigger corporation where like it's just they're there to clock in their work and then they're done.
It's funny you mention that because Shaun and I talk all the time about the I versus we, and how do you separate
Right.
when you're telling your story and when you're sharing digitally. We always have to like we fall into that trap of I. It's like, wait, we have to make sure there's some consistency here with the we as the agency, the I is the founder. It's very fascinating psychologically.
It is, and I've been called out on it a few times on Instagram because I think the few people who did call me out know that I'm just the one person in my studio. But it's like I said, I don't know if I had said this before, but I do believe that the idea of working under the umbrella of Zoca or working under the umbrella of Draplin, there's a much bigger presence than just you as well. In my mind, I think deserves, it commands the notion of being able to say we, because ultimately it's a bigger presence than just yourself. So I am a firm believer that if you're working under your company, that using the proverbial we is okay.
I'm with you, and I think you hit an interesting point about you've hit the level in your work, and I'm not quite where you are, but I'm certainly getting there. Where you realize that look, you're not all things to all people, and so people who you might not be the right fit for some clients, and that's okay. You don't have to try
Yep.
to bend and weave to someone else's will. You're going to be the right fit for another client, and then some. And that's Alicia and I've talked about that. She's hit that point. I've hit that point. You're definitely at that point. That's a great feeling. We'll kind of. I'm going to throw in one last question. I'll kind of do it as a hybrid. I had it as looking back. Would you do anything differently? And I think you can kind of pair that question with what the classic question: what's the one piece of advice you would give to somebody who's considering being where you were 5 years ago, or to going out and going solo?
Sure. What I did, I actually wrote down this answer because I really had to think on this one. But I think my heart would tell me like I wish I would have gone out sooner. Like I wish I would have already been working under myself for more than the five. I mean, technically, I was doing freelance work since 2007. And 2007 was really my first professional job, which was that Wilco poster. But I was always working in a traditional design studio and in a combination of doing my freelance projects. So to some degree, I was always doing freelance projects, but never 100% of the time. So if I could go back, I'd like to say that in my heart, I would have loved to have gone out sooner under Zoca. But to be honest, I didn't really have the foresight or the know-how to be able to go out on my own. And I think being at that one ad agency downtown for the year that I was gave me an immense amount of tools that if I didn't have those, Zoca would also not be where it is at today. So I'm glad that it was the right timing. In some way, I think it worked out for itself, especially with, what was going on with me personally and with my wife and all that stuff. So yeah, I probably wouldn't change it in that regard too much. But, the one big piece of advice that I would give anyone who might be in my position or was in my position, 5 years ago and wants to go out on their own, would be that, be confident in your abilities. I think there are, I go back to this. It's okay to think that you're going to fail. It's okay to have some fear. I think having fear is a healthy thing. It definitely put a fire under my butt that first year in the sense of, knocking on doors and doing what I could in order to make sure that I, gave myself every bit to succeed. And one thing that I'm thankful to myself, that sometimes I probably don't sort of appreciate this too much, but the one thing that I did that I didn't realize I was doing all these years was that I was forming relationships working on all these concert posters. So one thing I would tell people, which I think is sometimes frowned upon, but I could care less about this, is work side hustle gigs. If you're doing, full-time work, spend the extra time. Sometimes I had to spend weekends, form those relationships so that the time that when it comes to going out on your own, you're not starting from ground zero, which is something that I didn't have to do. When I started, I had already formed to some degree relationships and some clients that allowed me to sort of, kind of stay afloat a little bit. So I would say that's a nice cushion to do. And it requires a little bit of extra time, but it'll be well worth it, as opposed to just, okay, now what do I do? I got to go on LinkedIn or, on Instagram and send a bunch of DMs and ask people for work. I think it's important to build a foundation with, small set of clients and then go from there, because, once you dedicate 100% of your time to those clients, that referral process becomes organic. And then you realize that the work that you're putting in for them 100% of the time ends up evolving, that, they might recommend you to someone else, or they may give you more work down the road. So yeah, for me, I think that's a key thing that helped me out for sure.
Yeah, I love that. And I had just a follow-up question to that
Yeah.
before we close here. So, as a fellow designer, uh, it's hard to continually find inspiration, especially when you're working for yourself and you don't have a large team to collaborate with. How do you continually find inspiration and push yourself to get better as a creative?
That's a great question. Honestly, I think it's just a matter of being involved with the design community to some degree. Just acknowledging the talent that's out there, seeing the work that's coming in. I think, what your peers do sometimes often is a result of what you can do. So I think that's why I think social media is such a powerful tool, because you see everything that's being put out there, and to me, how it affects me is that, wow, you know this is being done, I'd like to try something like that. Or it just pushes my desire to want to continuously wanting to grow. But I think there's also innately, there's a creative sort of fire in me that has been there since I was a kid, that I'm able to, thankfully, and hopefully this doesn't die, is that I don't have to struggle too hard to come up with ideas, which is a great thing. I mean, there are times where I'm sure Shaun can attest to this, you might get writer's block or creative block, but maybe you listen to a bit of music, or you go for a stroll, or you jump on some crates, or you get on the bike, and all of a sudden the juices start flowing, and work comes about. So there are different ways to definitely go about that, but you know, staying close to your peers, I think, is a good thing.
Right on.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Jose, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you for being here with us today. It's always a pleasure. But truly, this was a lot of fun. So thank you. I had some great takeaways that I'll be writing down in the background.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure. It's a pleasure meeting you, Alicia. Shaun, you're a gem of a guy, and you guys are doing a great job with your podcast here. And I wish you guys a great day and a good weekend ahead.
And we're back. Seriously, how awesome was that?
I'm so glad you were able to get him on the show because he's just really, really incredible at his craft.
He's incredible at his craft and just such a humble guy. So calm and so easygoing. And to be able to be that good, we talked about checking ego at the door, but be able to be that good and have that level of humility is such a winning combination. It makes him so attractive to work with.
Yeah. I think a lot of things that he said I really found uh, insightful. I think one of the areas I found most insightful was when I asked him, how this got started, and he said he just emailed people. And I was
Yeah.
like, well, it's that easy, huh? You just emailed it. And it just made me realize that and this kind of goes back to what we talked about in our 2 episodes ago with wins, like giving ourselves permission to feel like we are good enough to email an international band and ask to design their poster.
The line that I wrote down that he had, and I literally I muted myself so I could type into email, was where he said it was okay to think that I could fail. That he knew that you can't try anything in this life without thinking, okay, if it doesn't work, I'll try something else. And that he had the wisdom, and it is wisdom to be able to do that. Was what really gave him I'm going to say the safety net to succeed.
Yeah. Well, two, he also identified that people still really love good art. People love music and people love art, and that's not going anywhere. And to be able to do that for a living and share his story on social media, and I think that's something we really up until this very moment have failed to talk about, how as a solopreneur utilize what you have, utilize these free resources. Like, yes, social media can be really horrible, but it can also be really helpful for business owners in telling their story and sharing what they do.
He found what worked for him. He found a way to do it, sort of at a low cost, and he, has just done this remarkable job and really grown. And he's not, knowing him as I do, he has a lot of work that comes his way, and he could almost sort of hit the point, I think, where he rests on his laurels and just waits for the work to come in, but he doesn't. He had slow periods during the pandemic, as we all did, and he was not above reaching out and knocking on doors again. You do what you have to do. You got to be scrappy to run your own business, and he is not afraid to be scrappy.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And like going back to social media, some things work and some things don't. You and I both talk about how we'll produce something and be like, wow, no one liked that at all. And then other things that you think nobody cares about, people love.
You had a great question for him about how to keep passion alive, because then that's exactly it. And so, when you create for a living, the reality is that not everything you create is going to be gold. And some of it may be your best and most inspired work, and some of it is good because you're good at what you do, but you know that you're going through the motions. And so, how do you stay inspired through that? Was a great question.
Right. Well, but also this goes back to your brand and telling your story, that it's okay to talk about that not everything you do is great. It adds that human element that, like, it makes you approachable. No one wants to work with someone that is egotistical and acts like every single thing they do is going to be incredible. Nobody wants that type of relationship, especially with a, yeah, a partner, a vendor in your marketing that you're working so closely with.
No, but my clients, for example, want to know that I'm trying my best and that I will make it right if it's not right the first time. What
Right,
part of what I do when I describe it as throwing past against a wall? That I try to get it right for the first time. That doesn't always happen. Most of the times I'm pretty good. My instincts are pretty good. There's a reason why I'm good at what I do, but it's not always perfect. And I know that if it's not perfect out the gate, we'll fix it. We'll get it right.
right, exactly, exactly. And that leads me to my next idea, that and we'll talk about this in another episode, that I've decided while on a bike ride that I am changing my company's tagline.
Okay,
I've
so
decided, yes.
should we close out with the new tagline?
Well, it's not 100% yet, but it made me realize that my brand is not just about me, Alicia. The brand is something much more. And I think it's a interesting theme that coincides with this episode's theme, is how to identify what your own brand is as your agency and who you are as a person. And I'm hoping we can explore that in further episodes, because I need to finish it up in my head, but I just wanted to share that.
I would love to. Well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to close off with the fact that I'm Shaun Bernstein. This was brought to you by the Right Stuff Agency, making your business sound as good as it looks. You can find us online at www, and I say us, as we talked about with Jose, Find us online at www.therightstuff, W-R-I-T-E, stuff.agency. Or I'm Shaun at therightstuff.agency. And then, Alicia, if you are up to sharing what you're cooking on your new tagline, I'd love to hear it. And if you're not, that's okay too. I'll leave it in your hands.
It's not ready yet, but I will give
Okay.
you my old tagline. So, Alicia Disantis, founder of 38 and Kip Design and Marketing, providing exceptional and fairly priced services. You can find me at 38andkip.com. That's 38 and Kip. You can also find me at 38andkip underscore design on Instagram. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening and watching.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.